And good afternoon, everyone. So, today is going to be the final week of classes. Next week is finals week, and I actually forgot to send out mail. I will make sure I do that today. But this week we are going to be going over online learning. Now, all of you should be very familiar with this, at least using it because you've had to do it within the last 8 weeks, and hopefully you've become a little bit familiar. But we're basically going to touch upon the history of it, along with various classes and locations and everything for all sorts of online education. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So, the history of this. Um, Isaac Pittman, he's widely acknowledged as the creator of the first distance education course. In the 1840s, he developed a system for teaching shorthand where he would mail text transcribed in shorthand and receive transcriptions from the students that he would then correct and send back to them. This allowed him to correspond with students all over the world. Isaac Pittman was English, and so I believe that they had a part of the London College um, in India, which he would actually correspond with, as well as a lot of people around England itself. Um, he started with shorthand because, well, those of you who don't know what shorthand is, it's basically a method of writing without writing full words out there. You kind of use some shapes and different lines based off of the tone and everything else. I personally don't know shorthand, so I'm not an expert on it, but I do know that it was used a lot in for court reporters because it was a method for them to capture what was being said without having to write out the entire word. And then later on, they would transcribe that back to actual written text. So people had to learn how to read and write shorthand. And so he created this course so that he could train people who weren't near him all over all over the world pretty much and help them learn shorthand. And so he's the creator of the first distance education course. In 1958, the University of London established its external program chartered by Queen Victoria. This was the first university to offer distance learning degrees to students. And this, I believe, offered a lot of them to India because back then in the 1850s, India was actually a part of England. And so there were a lot of people who would travel to India or travel from India. And so the London College or University of London actually had a location there as well. And so they started offering distance learning degrees so that people could get their own degree. Then let's see, William Rainey Harper created the first collegiate correspondence courses in 1881 at Chautauqua College, which he also implemented at the University of Chicago when he was selected as the first president in 1891. And this is kind of the start, well, this isn't really the start of it, but this is the start in the US of correspondence courses from nationally known universities. Before this time, you really had to travel to the university and had to go to school there. But with these correspondence courses, it allowed them to package up the same content and ship it off to somebody. They would do the work and then send it back to the instructor to get graded. Now, obviously, it wasn't as real time as what we currently experience, but it was something that still allowed some who lived in a different state to actually learn. So he became the first president of the University of Chicago, and it kind of just spread from there. So it's a William Rainey Harper is an interesting story about him. Um, so I would encourage you to read up about him. There's also a college named after him, Harper College in Palatine, Illinois. So, yep. All right. 1977, Ben Cohen and Jerry Greenfield. You may not immediately recognize those names, but you will recognize what they went on to create. So they completed a $5 correspondence course from Penn State University on how to make ice cream. After they did that, they decided to start this little known brand called Ben and Jerry's in May 1978. And Ben and Jerry's has gone on to become really popular. In fact, I think I have some Ben and Jerry's in my freezer right now, which I have not eaten yet. I probably should. But they completed and it was only $5 back in 1977. It was also on making ice cream. So apparently it worked, and they made a lot more than $5 on it. And it's been growing since then. And really, kind of the drive behind online correspondence and distance correspondence is you can get an education without actually having to sit in on a class, which is kind of cool. Uh, 2001, MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, they announced OpenCourseWare, and it's an initiative where they would publish all of their educational materials online and make it freely available. So any class that MIT offers, they would put up there along with homework. Sometimes they'll put tests up there. The lectures themselves, either just the text or maybe they'll have videos. It's actually a lot of stuff. And so they started in 2001 and they're still going right now. I need to update these statistics, but as of 2001, more than 2,400 courses are available online, and there were more than 500 million unique visitors, or 500 million visitors. So go ahead and check this out really quick. So this is the MIT OpenCourseWare site. And if you do a search for MIT Open Courseware or MIT online courses or whatever, you'll be able to find it easily enough. But you could find courses on pretty much anything. So let's say topic. Let's go ahead and choose mathematics because everybody loves math. And linear algebra because, well, linear algebra is cool. And then down here, all sorts of different ones. So linear algebra fall 2011. This is the undergraduate level. If I click on that, gives you a bit of information about that. Interestingly enough, I actually watched the videos on this course. The Professor Gilbert Strang, he's a really good instructor. I, I highly encourage you, if you ever want to learn anything linear algebra, check out these videos because he's a really good instructor, and they're all on YouTube. So there's video lectures, which if we click on that, we can actually get to the individual lectures. There's also, go back, there's lecture notes, exams and solutions, all sorts of stuff. This is the entire course that they gave in, I think it was fall 2011. There's also other courses, all sorts of topics. There's a lot. And so let me see if I can get updated numbers on this. So about materials for more than 2,400 courses, 500 million visitors. I don't know if there's any more updated site statistics, but basically a lot of people have started to use it. And it's something that you can use even if you're just curious about a subject or if you need a refresher on some of it. So that was one of the first things. Then notable for me, May 2013, Georgia Institute of Technology announced a fully online Master of Computer Science. It's a Master of Science in Computer Science through a partnership with Udacity. Now, I'm actually in this program right now, and I'm halfway through it. I will hopefully finish in a year, but it is notable for being one of the cheapest and one of the first fully online master's programs through a nationally ranked computer science school. I think Georgia Tech is ranked eighth in the U.S. as a computer science school nationally. Um, but and we'll talk a little bit more about that on one of the later slides. But it's a really cool program that they have. And since May 2013, more recently, a couple of other schools have started to add on to it and have their own online master's program, including University of Texas, I believe, and University of Illinois Urbana campus. Stanford, I believe, has one now. So it's starting to become more and more common. But Georgia Tech was one of the first ones to really start to push it. So, now that we gave a brief history of it, what are some of the advantages of an online education? And I mean, so I have the chat window on my other monitor, so I can actually see if you pipe up and toss them out there. Because normally in class, I would ask around class and see what people say, but if nobody pipes up, well, I'm just going to sit here twiddling my thumbs, and nobody really wants that. So I'm going to go ahead and mention some. If you happen to come up with something, then I will make note of that and I will talk about it for a bit. So, what are some of the advantages? And me speaking from personal experience, at least with my classes, the ability to work on them when I want or when I need to or when I have time is a huge advantage. So, in a traditional classroom, you have a set period that you have to be in that class, say Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 10 to 10:50. And then after with that, then you have to do homework and you have to do that. But 3 days a week, every week for 16 weeks or 15 weeks, somewhere around there, you basically have to sit in the same chair and do the same thing. Whereas with an online education, it's a lot more flexible. It's something to where if you decide that you really don't want to watch the videos, you have sometimes an entire week to watch the videos on it. Or if you're assigned a project, you have maybe 2 weeks to work on the project. You can put it off a day, or you can work on it early and then you can slack off the rest of the 2 weeks. So you can also schedule it around, say, work. So if you're working full time, then in the evenings you can attend your class sessions, and it's something which allows a lot more flexibility with it. Let's see, reducing travel cost. So you don't have to drive back and forth to school. At least for me, sometimes there might be times where, at least right now, it's not an issue, but maybe if I wanted to attend school in another state, say Georgia, um, I wouldn't be able to drive back and forth to the Georgia Tech campus and take those classes. Flying would be too expensive, so I wouldn't be able to do that. But with an online education, I don't have to leave my house. It's a lot easier, a lot quicker to get to the virtual class than I would have to with a regular class. So if you do live further away from the actual campus, it really can reduce that. Let's see. You can choose what level of classes you want. Um, you can study wherever you want. So if you happen to have a really comfortable chair that you do your best thinking in, maybe you call it your thinking chair. I don't know. But if you happen to have a chair or a location that you do your best work in, you can do that with an online education. If you have a particular set of comfortable clothes that you happen to do your best work in, you can wear those comfortable clothes, whereas you might not be able to wear them out in public. Who knows? So let's see. Um, you can join discussions in on a bulletin board as opposed to having to be in class and raise your hand. Let's see. Different learning styles are addressed, uh, which if you learn by having somebody sit in front of you and talk, great. If you learn by reading a book the entire time, great. With online education, you don't have to learn the same way that you would in a traditional school. Some people learn when there is a teacher in front of them pointing out things and talking about it, and that's perfectly fine. Whereas other people, they just start to zone out and they feel like it's a waste of time until they actually get home and start doing the work, and that's when they feel like they learn. And with online education, it kind of blends the best of both worlds. It You can have somebody talking to you, or you can tune it out and then just do your own thing. Everybody learns at a different pace. Everybody learns at a different method, and it can you can do it your own way. Let's see. Um, Increased access. Yep, this is a key one. With online education, you have access to instructors all over the world. A traditional school, you have access to the instructors at that school. And sometimes some instructors you may not learn the best from. Not to say that they're a bad instructor. Again, everybody has a different way of learning. And how instructor A teaches may not be the best for student A. Student A may only learn from instructor B, but maybe instructor B doesn't actually teach at that school, but they teach at another school. With some online education, you can pick and choose who you actually want to learn from, or which courses you want to take, or where you actually learn there, or where you actually pick it up from. Let's see, I already touched upon the convenience, flexibility. Um, Again, you can do it wherever you want. And so there are other advantages. I'm kind of glossing over a lot of them, but if you happen to come up with any, which I didn't touch upon, feel free to mention that there. Let's see. Oh, lower total costs. So a lot of online classes typically have a cheaper cost than going to school. And I'll mention this a little bit later, but basically, to get a master's degree, it costs about forty to $60,000 from a decent school. It can go up to $100,000 from a really, really good school. I'm not sure exactly how much it is from Georgia Tech to get a in-person master's degree, but it's probably in the 40 to $60,000 range. Whereas with the online program, to get a master's degree from Georgia Tech, it costs me, if I was to do it in the ideal length of time, it would cost me $7,000 to get the exact same master's that somebody on campus would have to pay $40,000 for. So there's a huge cost savings there. And that can also translate to other degrees and other classes. So a lot of times online classes tend to be a little bit cheaper than the in-campus equivalent for a number of reasons. The first reason is you can have a lot more students in a particular class in an online format than you can with a in-person format. So let's think about that for a second. So you have a classroom, you have a physical classroom, and you have a number of seats. You can only sit a X number of people. Let's say you can sit 50 people in a particular room. So you can have 50 students in a class at a time, whereas an online format, you don't have a limitation to the number of students, a physical limitation to the number of students. There are some practical limitations, but there is no 50 seat limit. So you can have a class with 500 students or 1,000 students. You can have almost as many students as you can teach at one time. Now, there are some theoretical limits and there are some other practical limits, such as uh, if you have 500 students and you're one professor, you're not going to want to grade 500 papers all at once. And that's where teaching assistants and other automated methods start to come into play. But it still does allow you to teach a lot more students at once. And so because of that, the school can enroll more students in a class, which can bring the overall cost of that class down. The other key part of the lower costs is you don't have to provide the lighting, the electricity, the maintenance, and everything else for a classroom. You don't have to schedule a classroom for different classes. So it just allows you to lower the overall costs and keep it much more manageable. Let's see, more interaction, greater ability to concentrate. That's both the pro and a con. Um, you can continue in your profession. So, at least in my case, I work full time, I teach, and I'm a student. I'm technically considered a part-time student because I'm only taking 2 classes a semester, but because it is online, I can do all of that at once. Whereas if I really did want to go to Georgia Tech in person, I would not be able to have the job that I currently have or teach the class that I currently have because I have to live in Georgia and actually go to class there. So it allows you to continue whatever profession you have and advance your career by doing online education. So we talked about the advantages. Let's go ahead and talk about a few disadvantages and see what we can come up with that. Well, there's a um, kind of a phrase that once it exists on the internet, or once it's on the internet, it's there forever. I'm kind of paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact phrase, but it's the same concept. Once you do something online, it's there forever. If you're sitting in a classroom and teacher asks you a question, you say something and you mess it up and you accidentally say something intentionally or unintentionally funny and everybody laughs at you and you get really super embarrassed. Well, people remember that for all of about an hour and then they might forget about it. Or at the very least, once the semester is over, people forget about it. Whereas online, if you post something and you the same situation, same thing intentionally or unintentionally funny, and people make fun of you, you get embarrassed, that stays up there. Now, there are ways to delete some of the content and that sort of stuff, but there's a lot more permanence to what you post online. And some people may not like that. And it does intimidate people because if you happen to say or do something which is completely out of character and you just don't happen to catch it in time, it's up there. People may screenshot whatever you wrote, share it everywhere, and that can be a problem. So it's much more dangerous for online communication than it is for just speaking face to face. You might not be comfortable having your comments exposed for everybody to see and criticize. So very much the same as the permanence of the contributions. You happen to say something, you may not be comfortable with that. Whereas in a classroom, well, people forget. Uh, this is actually a big one, which a lot of people, even I, have struggled with. Fear of having to sound intelligent. So if you're in a classroom, you're amongst a whole bunch of your peers who happen to be about the same level academic wise. And so if you say something which may not necessarily saying it's dumb, but if you say something which seems obvious in hindsight, people just aren't going to really notice as much because you're all about the same educational level. Whereas on the other hand, if it's online and you happen to say something, your classmates may come from wide ranging academic and educational backgrounds. And there can be somebody in class who is much higher academically and speaks a lot more intelligently about the subject just because they've already advanced further than you have. And so now you may feel that you have to keep up with them. And so there is that definite fear of having to sound intelligent, even though it's uh, everybody's there to learn. It's just kind of a psychological thing. There's the fear of being impolite. Again, in person, when you're talking, to somebody face to face, you can gauge how their reactions are, or what they're thinking, or what even their face is saying. Whereas online, if you say something, well, you don't know what the person on the other line is actually thinking. You don't know how they're reacting to it. Maybe you say a joke and nobody laughs or reacts to it, and then now you worry that maybe that joke was poorly received. And a lot of people have the same problem with text messaging. You say something, and then you realize that what you said could be taken a different way. And online education is very, very similar to that. Um, let's see. Oh, this one speaks really strongly to me. Procrastination. I'm a huge procrastinator, and over the years, I've had to become less and less of a procrastinator just because, well, if I'm a procrastinator, things don't get done. And if things don't get done, I don't pass the class. Well, I really want to pass the class, so I have to do things. Ergo, procrastination has to go away. It does take a certain mindset to break out of that procrastination loop. And it's something which people have struggled. And even nowadays, everybody's going to fully online classes. A lot of people, it's kind of been a cold water in the face type of thing. You've had to suddenly come to the realization that, hey, this homework is due. I can't put it off anymore because, well, it's now due. Whereas in the past, maybe you could procrastinate a bit and then talk face to face with the professor and apologize, make some excuse, valid or not, and go about the day. Whereas with online, for everything, it's a lot harder. And it's a lot easier with an online thing when, with some people, me particularly, if you don't have someone constantly saying, okay, now this assignment is due this week, now this assignment is due this week, you start to get into this sense of, oh, I don't have anything to do. I'm going to just play another video game. I will freely admit to having had those thoughts before. So it does take discipline, and it does take acknowledgement of your own shortcomings, which some people have problems actually doing. So you have to be motivated. Uh, Lack of a routine, similar thing. If it's something to where you don't have to sit in class every day and you only have to check it once a week, it can be easier to forget to check 1 week, or to just say, oh, well, it'll be there next week, or this project's not due for 2 weeks, I'll just start doing it then. So you have to kind of set a routine and do that. Uh, and again, this is another thing that people have probably started to feel more and more lately with the whole coronavirus. The feeling of isolation or missing social interactions. If you are sitting in a class and you have somebody next to you or nearby that you can talk to, or you happen to have a person that shares two classes with you, and then suddenly you can talk to them and ask them questions, or you run into a problem and you can ask a random person questions. It really helps with that aspect. Whereas if you're only online, it's a lot easier to just ignore all the other students and do your own thing, and then start to feel isolated. And again, all of you have probably experienced some of this more recently just because everything is suddenly transitioned online, but it's still one of the definite disadvantages of an online education. Slow or unreliable internet connections. And hopefully none of you ever have to deal with this because it can be super frustrating. But if you have a internet connection, again, because it's all online education, it's you have to have a good internet connection. And if you have a slow internet connection or an internet connection which constantly drops out, it can be really, really frustrating if you have to watch one of your class videos. Or even more than that, it can be really, really bad if your internet connection drops out in the middle of a test and the professor isn't understanding about it. So it's one of those problems that you have to think about. Here in the US, it's not as big of an issue, but with online education being global, it's more of an issue with third world countries with really bad internet connectivity. So it's something that people all over the place have to be aware of. And some places they have only dial up internet connections, which are really slow, and that's what they have to deal with. Managing learning software can involve a learning curve. Again, if you aren't familiar with the learning platform, there is some learning difficulties with that. Although once you get a handle of it, it's really not that bad till the company changes the way it works, and then suddenly you have to change the way that you do it. Some courses, such as traditional hands-on courses, can be difficult to simulate. And you can see this more with labs, like any sort of chemistry labs or physics or engineering labs or anything along those lines. Some of those are really difficult for you to do at home. And so some of the ways around it is to have you buy a kit, do it at home, or maybe sometimes you have to travel to a classroom. Maybe they have satellite classrooms that you travel to, do the lab, and then go back home and to be done with it. But there are ways around it. It's not an insurmountable difficulty, but it is a difficulty that people will encounter. Let's see. Oh, chances for more distractions. I say that as one of my cats is next to me, purring a little bit, and she's really cute. There is a definite problem with distractions on online learning. The same thing as an advantage of where you can find the location that you're most comfortable is also a disadvantage. If you find the place that you're most comfortable, suddenly now instead of reading the book that you need to, maybe there's a cat that wants you to pet and happens to distract you. Or maybe the TV happens to be in front of you and you just decide that, oh, well, I'll just watch one episode and then go back to studying. Kind of falls in the procrastination part. But the distractions can be an issue, and it's one of those things that it takes a little bit of discipline to rein in. There's also the chances for or chance for fraudulent practices. So my classes that I'm taking online, to take a test, they use a program called ProctorTrack, and this program requires you to have a computer with a webcam and a microphone, and you sit in front of the computer, and when you take the test, it records the video during the entire time. Now, it's not infallible, and there are ways to bypass some of the protections. It tries to do the best that they can. And really, we've seen this now with schools rapidly trying to go to an online platform. How do you prevent cheating or any sort of fraudulent practices from happening? And there are programs there like ProctorTrack, which will help, but they are not the best and they're not infallible. And it's one of those things that the professors and the students have to figure out a way to work around, either an additional time limit on a test. So instead of if you were in class, you have 30 minutes, maybe you only have 15 minutes on an online class, or maybe changing the type of tests instead of being multiple choice that you can easily Google the answers to, maybe making it all essay answers. And so now the students aren't able to easily Google the answers to it. So it's just one of those things where it's a lot easier to cheat in an online class than an in-person class, but there are ways to kind of prevent some types of cheating. The last thing that I'm going to mention is um, online classes have kind of had a stigma around them, which is they are easier or you don't have to do as much work. And that's been a fairly big problem with online class or online lessons in general because some some people don't think that you get as good of an education or the equivalent education as what you would if you were sitting in front of a professor teaching. And that may be true for some classes, but I know it's not true for every class. So in the case of Georgia Tech, for instance, the classes that I'm taking are the exact same classes that they give for the in-person classes. The exact same projects, the exact same instructor, a lot of times the exact same instructor, or at least the exact same curriculum. For instance, the computer vision class I just took, there were 6 projects which were the same as the on-class or in-person classes. The exam was a cumulative exam across the entire semester. It was the exact same as the in-person. And the videos. Now, the videos were previously recorded, and they've used the same videos over the last several years. But the content in there is the exact same as what you would have in person. So it's not like the course is watered down for an online format. But in some cases, that has happened. They remove some content because it's harder to do an online instruction for certain things. And so there's been this preconceived notion that online classes are not the same academically rigorous as an in person class, which is not fair. And it's going to be changing because as more and more schools start to offer online courses, that's going to become less and less of an issue. And so hopefully job or companies start to realize that online classes are not as bad as in-person classes, and in some cases they may even be better because people or students gain knowledge from a lot of different people as opposed to only from one specific school. So those are some of the disadvantages. And I kind of touched upon the challenges with online learning. Procrastination, having to have a set routine is always helpful. Um, uh, Having to have good internet access, that's also a challenge. Combating cheating is also a challenge. So I'm not really going to rehash all of that. So, 2 types of online learning. There's synchronous and asynchronous learning. Asynchronous learning is where the students can download documents, files, whatever, at any point, learn at your own pace. The instructors post the lectures, videos, homework, etc., typically at the start of the week or at a set time. Release it and tell the students, okay, you have 2 weeks to complete this. A lot of discussion is done via email, discussion boards. It's much more flexible because everyone does not need to be online at the same time to participate. My courses through Georgia Tech, they're all asynchronous. And in fact, most of the online courses that I have seen in general happen to be asynchronous. The professor usually posts it, or ATA usually posts the content uh, either at the beginning of the week or the end of the week, depends upon the particular class. They usually have Piazza or D2L or Canvas or something like that to allow students to get on there, post stuff. They can also communicate through Slack or Teams or some other messaging back and forth. They can collaborate, they can work on stuff, but they don't actually have to sit down for an hour once a week or every other day to listen to some professor drone in their ear about asynchronous. Oh, I mean, they don't have to sit and listen to a professor toss out jokes and um, communicate with the students in a friendly and welcoming manner about the benefits to online education. Anyway, um, it allows a lot more flexibility because it is up to the student when they want to watch the videos, when they want to do stuff, and go on from there. The opposite type is the synchronous learning. So synchronous all at once, kind of self-explanatory. So it's kind of like a virtual classroom. And there are classes which are done like this, and a lot of there are classes even now. Well, I mean, this I had a set time when I'm going to start streaming, and so that's kind of synchronous because you're actively listening to me talk at the time. But this is something where some professors may say, okay, everybody has to be online at this time and listen to this lecture. We aren't going to record it. This is going to be the only time that it happens. And it's kind of more like an actual classroom, only just virtually. The instructor might type in a chat. We have a little chat bar here, which nobody writes in, but there could be a chat bar there, and people can communicate back and forth and chat amongst themselves while the professor is speaking, or the TA could be there, or whatever. One of the benefits is if you ask a question, the professor can see it and answer it right away. Whereas with the asynchronous learning, if you ask a question, it could be a day, it could be a month. The professor might completely ignore the question. You may not know if anybody's ever actually seen it. Whereas with synchronous learning, you know that the professor is right there and has probably read it and is either ignoring it or thinking about it. You also have more direct interaction with the instructor, again, because the instructor is there at the time that he's actually doing it, he or she is doing it, and you write something there, that's much more interaction with it. Uh, Downside is much like a traditional classroom, you have to attend at a set time and get the lecture. It's a lot more of, I don't want to say hand holding, but it kind of is. It's basically forcing you to be at a location at a set time. The other downside is you have to make time in your schedule for that particular class, like a regular class. So those are the two different types, synchronous and asynchronous. So now we get on to MOOCs, or Massive Open Online Course. MOOC is just fun to say, MOOC. It's an online course that is aimed at unlimited participation and open access via the web. And when I say unlimited participation, that's a traditional classroom, you have a set number of seats. A MOOC is designed to where that number is much, much, much larger. It can be a couple hundred up to several thousand to no actual limit. It was first introduced in 2006, and they became a much more popular mode of learning in 2012. In the fall of 2011, Stanford University launched three courses, uh, and enrollment quickly reached 160,000 students in those courses. The first course was Introduction into AI by, I believe, Peter Norvig and Sebastian Thrun. Thrun? Oh, actually, Sebastian Thrun was the next one. Um, Peter Norvig, I believe, was the first one because he was a professor at Stanford. But the first course was Introduction to AI. Shortly after, Sebastian Thrun founded Udacity. And Udacity is one of the platforms for videos on courses. Um, Daphne Koller and Andrew Ng launched Coursera shortly after that. And that's kind of a competitive to Udacity. There's Udacity, Coursera, Udemy, edX. There's several different ones out there now. But Udacity and Coursera were two of the first open ones. In May 2013, Udacity, founded by Sebastian Thrun, AT&T, and T, and the Georgia Institute of Technology announced the first entirely MOOC-based master's degree. The entire degree costs around $7,000 versus about $18,000 per year for in-class lesson. So if you were to complete the degree in 2 years, that would be about $40,000. So it was fairly close on the $40,000 to $60,000 versus $7,000 for 2 years worth of taking classes. Now, the MOOCs, or the classes through Georgia Tech, are not unlimited participation. They actually are more traditional to where you have to register for classes at a certain time. And you have certain wait lists, and there are certain class limits. However, unlike the in-class ones, classes for the online masters have typically 250 all the way up to, I think the largest class size I saw was 800 students. I'd have to go back and check and see, but they they're less than 1,000 students, and the reason for that is, yes, the technology can support 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 students at once, But because it's the same classwork as the in-person, they have somebody grade it. And so they hire teaching assistants to run the class. In fact, in all the classes I've taken so far, well, with the exception of two of the classes, so three of the classes I've taken so far, the professor rarely showed up. Uh, they may have shown up a few times, but for the most of the semester, it's usually the teaching assistants which you would communicate with. And TAs, a lot of times the head TA is going to be somebody who is in a PhD program or has advanced far enough to where they're almost the same level as a professor. They just aren't quite a professor yet. And so they have the ability to run the class. And anything that they do, they still clear it with the actual professor. So it's not like they have freedom to teach whatever. It's still run by the professor, but the professor just doesn't actually sit there and hold everybody's hand. They generally create the videos, they create the homeworks, they put it up there, and then they let the TAs run the class. And so they still have to hire enough TAs to actually run the class. And so they set the uh, number of slots in the class, and then as they hire more TAs to run the class, then they add more students into, or they open up the number of slots. So that's why it's not unlimited participation, but it still does allow a lot more students than what a regular in class would do. The other two classes, the professor actually was there all the time and would actually post online and answer questions directly and was really engaged with the students. So, all right. So these are, let's go ahead and pull up MOOClist.com, mooc-list.com. This is a website to where you can find all sorts of MOOCs. Um, so you can do a search for course title contains linear algebra and do a search for that. And it's been a while since I actually did this. Linear regression for business statistics, algebra basica. This is university, well, from Mexico. I probably would not take that class just because it may be in Spanish. Yep, it is in Spanish. And so advanced linear models for data science, but this does a search and shows you where the classes actually are. So you can use, oops, not that one, use this site to find different MOOCs if you wanted to learn different things. Coursera, Udacity, Udemy, edX. These are the, I guess, kind of the big four MOOCs, online MOOCs. Also, there's the MIT OpenCourseWare. But Coursera, I don't know why it went all the way down to the bottom. Coursera is a online one where, let's see, go ahead and do a search for art, artificial intelligence and do a search. AI for everyone. And I clicked on that. There we go. And so this is a course. This is taught by Andrew Ng. And supposedly this is a really, really good course. I have not taken this course, so I'm not um, familiar with the structure and everything. But I have talked to people who have taken these classes, and especially ones from Andrew Ng, and he supposedly teaches really. He's a really, really good instructor. So if you're curious, beginner level, you can go ahead and do it. Takes about 6 hours to complete this, and you get a shareable certificate. It's 100% online, and it's offered by deeplearning.ai. But this is a course. Enroll for free. Starts May 5th, which is actually today. Um, they do have some classes which you can pay for, but a lot of their classes are free. That's why it says financial aid available. Um, there is also Udacity. That's where I have been getting a lot of my videos. And it's a very similar thing. Programs, artificial intelligence, computer vision, which I just completed these computer vision course through Georgia Tech, so I don't. It actually had the videos on Udacity, so wonder if this is the actual one. Oh, that's the syllabus. But anyway, you can take computer vision classes or artificial intelligence classes, and you can do all of that. Um, Udemy, edX, they're going to be very similar. Um, edX is 100% free, I believe. Um, but they do have these micro masters and micro bachelors, which are kind of small bachelor programs, which you take the classes online, you pay for it, and then you get a certificate provided by WGU, NYU, ASU, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this one, it's $166 credit for a micro bachelor's program. This is kind of cool because instead of going to school for 4 years, now you can go to school for, well, less than 4 years and it's all online and get a quote unquote micro bachelor's. The problem is that since it is not a full bachelor's, it may not be that useful. And you might learn a lot of the same stuff that you would in a regular bachelor's, but other schools may not recognize the classes that you took. Or um, since it's not a full bachelor's, it may not work if you wanted to get into a master's program. So it is good. It does say earn college credit for your future. So you can take the classes, and if they're accredited, then you can actually transfer them to other schools. But just be aware that because this is still new, relatively new, it's not a lot of places really acknowledge some of these programs. Um, Khan Academy. Now, Khan Academy is awesome. If you've never heard of Khan Academy, well, you should definitely check out Khan Academy at some point. Khan Academy is the reason why a lot of students pass any of their math classes. This is a site which was started by a guy by the name of Sal Khan. Um, he was I believe he worked for a hedge fund in Boston, and he started. He got requests from some of his cousins, I believe, and I'm mentioning this, but I could be slightly off. Um, this YouTube video says a little bit more, but um, he got a request from some of his cousins to teach them, I think it was algebra, and they were younger, and so he would record YouTube videos and demonstrate some of the stuff and teach them. And then he started to get requests or get comments from people all over the place. And so he decided to start doing all of this full time. All of the videos on here, and I think with the exception of a few videos, but every single video on here was created by him and recorded by him. And there are a lot of courses. So like AP Calculus, AB, I don't know what the AB is. Um, learn more. Does this actually show? No, I'll get rid of that for the moment. Um, that's let's see. That's not what I wanted to see. Well, you can go poking around at this, but the videos, they're 10 minutes in length. There's a whole bunch of them for every course, but they are good. I mean, they're really, really good. If you are stuck on a topic, and especially if you're taking math and any sort of advanced math, or even if you get stuck on algebra 2 or pre-calculus or trigonometry or something like that, I encourage you to watch these videos. There's a video on each individual topic. So like on trigonometry, um, pull it up for a minute. All of these are different topics in trigonometry. And Sal Khan has created the videos to explain every single thing. So introduction to radians, unit circle, graphs of the sine, cosine, tangent. He does a great, great job of teaching these. So Khan Academy is the best site that I can ever recommend for learning anything. It's 100% free. They're a nonprofit. They do accept donations, and they they are really worthy of the donations because they are trying to get education out to everybody around the world. So Khan Academy is I cannot say enough good things about Khan Academy. Let's start from here. So this video, this is actually a talk that Sal Khan gave at it's a TED Talk about the future of online education. I 100% say that you should watch it. It's about 10, 15 minutes, but it's a really good talk, and it's he's a really smart guy and a really great guy. And again, I can't say enough good things about him. This is just a Wikipedia list of MOOC providers. You can see how many there actually are. This is probably not, well, I know this is not an exhaustive list, but you can also see when they were founded. I guess the Great Courses was founded in 1990, but I don't know. I've never heard of that before, so I'm not sure how it's actually used. But if we look at Udacity 2012, Udemy 2010, etc. So um, that, and then this other video that is another TED Talk from Peter Norvig, and about the first course from Stanford that they did online, the Introduction to AI. I also really encourage you to watch that. I think that one's only about 5 minutes long. So the final thing that I wanted to talk about today, other than MOOCs, there's also online video and coding courses. Because this is computer science, we have to talk about programming because, well, programming is cool. And also because I work in IT, I have to talk about some IT stuff because, well, IT is cool. So CBT Nuggets and Pluralsight are two websites. They are not free, um, but they have a lot of videos on different topics, usually geared more towards business and IT stuff. So they're a commercial one. They really aren't cheap, but I'm just putting it out there as more online education methods to where you basically watch a video, and then a lot of times those videos allow you to train you up enough to be able to get a certification. Code Academy or Code Academy. This is a website to where you can actually learn to program. And there are pricing and all that sort of stuff. But they also have free ones, basic. You can have there's 25 courses. I think you can learn up to 25. I'm not sure exactly, um, but this allows you to, if you wanted to start learning basic programming, there is Python. This is a path for computer science, but there are like Python courses that you can take, and it actually teaches you to program in Python. So Codecademy is really good. Kaggle is another one similar to Academy. That's more for data science. Caddis. Caddis is another similar site for programming problems, that sort of stuff. And this is more for actually solving problems. The ICPC, the International Collegiate Programming Competition Contest, uh, this actually uses Caddis on the back end for running the competition. And there's actually contests here and everything, but this is where they would host the problems, and contestants would write the code for it and submit it to it, and it would grade that and everything else. So Caddis is a cool thing, and this is something where after you start to program, solving Caddis problems, if we go to problems, there's all sorts of problems here. It also shows you the difficulty, like 2048. So this shows you what you need to do. It shows you what the input, what the expected output is supposed to be, sample input, what the sample output would be in that case. And so you have to write a program to solve it. And then a lot of times, in this case, yep, you submit it, and then it runs it, and it spits back if you were right or wrong. So Caddis is pretty cool. And the creator of Caddis, he's a really cool. I think he's Swedish. Really cool guy. And then the final one is Leet Code, and this is another programming thing. Um, if you get a degree in computer science and you decide that you want to get a software engineering job or some sort of programming job, a lot of the interview questions will come from Leet Code, and you can look through this. Let's get it started. Um, you can look through this to find top interview questions, and some of these go here. Easy collection. So it will uh, ask things. Oh, apparently I need to log in, so I'm not going to log in. But it will ask you programming questions or algorithm questions. And so you can use LeetCode to brush up on your skills to um, land the job that you want. Or if you happen to have an interview with Google, for instance, and it's a software development job, they are going to ask you questions which come directly from the LeetCode website. And it's things that any computer scientist should know, but if it's been years since you actually took the algorithms course or something like that, you might have forgotten some of it. So LeetCode is one of those websites which just helps you learn and uh, refresh your memory on some of the stuff. And that is all I have for today. Now, I don't actually have anything for Thursday, so I will not be streaming Thursday. Next week is the final week, and that's when we're going to have the finals. I will send out an email about this and let everybody know. But this will be the last streaming time that I actually do this. So hopefully you guys learned stuff. Hopefully you picked up little tidbits of wisdom and maybe you chuckled a little bit at some of my jokes. If you didn't chuckle a little bit, well, in my mind you chuckled a little bit. So hopefully you all have a great rest of the week. I will send out an email, which I forgot to send out yesterday and today, so I will have to type that up. And I will talk to you all hopefully sometime in the future.